She wasn't supposed to notice me. Not really. I was just another student sitting near the back, quiet, mostly on time, the kind who typed more than he spoke. But she did notice. Maybe because I looked at her too long one day, or maybe because I didn't look away fast enough. Her name was Dr. Arden Vale, though everyone called her Professor Vale. Voice calm but deliberate, like every word had to be earned before it was spoken. She taught modern literature, which somehow always felt like a class about people instead of books. That morning, the rain had left streaks on the tall windows beside her desk. I came in late, again, and she paused mid-sentence, eyes flicking toward me just long enough for the air to shift. No scolding. Just awareness. I mumbled an apology and took the seat by the radiator. It hissed softly, like it was covering for the silence between us. "Try to join us on time next week, Mr. Lennox," she said. The words were stern. Her tone wasn't. The class went on. She talked about restraint in writing, how the most powerful lines are the ones that almost don't get said. I wasn't sure if she was still teaching literature at that point. When it ended, most people rushed out. I lingered, pretending to gather my notes slower than necessary. She was wiping the board, sleeve pushed up, chalk dust on her wrist. I don't know why I said it. Is restraint supposed to feel this difficult? She stopped, half smiled, then looked over her shoulder. It depends on what you're trying to hold back. Her eyes lingered just long enough to make my chest tighten. Then she turned away, brushing chalk off her fingers, like the moment hadn't just opened something. After that, I started showing up early. She always arrived before the others, balancing her thermos and a stack of essays. Sometimes I'd hold the door open. Sometimes she'd thank me with that tired, amused expression, like she knew I was trying not to stare. I told myself it was admiration, that I respected her discipline, her clarity. But respect doesn't make your pulse jump when someone leans close to explain a passage over your shoulder. Once, I caught her watching me read. She looked away fast, pretending to fix her sleeve. But it was too late, we both knew. I don't have anyone waiting for me after class. My phone stays silent most nights. I walk back to my apartment, reheat old coffee, stare at an unfinished story on my laptop. Sometimes I type her name, just to see how it looks next to mine, then delete it before the cursor can blink twice. It's not that I'm lonely, exactly. Just aware of the spaces where someone could be, the pauses that hang too long between thoughts. This evening, after our midterm review, I stayed behind again. The room was almost dark, only the hallway light spilling in. She was at her desk, glasses low on her nose, grading papers. "You should go home, Mr. Lennox," she said without looking up. "Maybe I don't want to yet," I heard myself say. That made her glance up, slow, deliberate. Her eyes caught mine, steady and unreadable. Then, quietly, like it wasn't meant to be heard, "You're making me weak." I froze. My throat went dry. The rain started again outside, tapping the glass like it wanted to remind us of time. And before I could think of anything better, or safer, to say, the words just left me, strong enough to want me. For a second, neither of us moved. Then she set her pen down, softly, like surrender disguised as order. The room went still, and I realized the next thing she said, or didn't say, would change everything. I didn't see her for 3 days after that. She'd cancelled class, left a note on the door in her narrow handwriting. "Unexpected department meeting. See you next week." It shouldn't have bothered me as much as it did, but it did. The air felt heavier, like the absence of her voice had rearranged something I didn't know I relied on. When she finally returned, she looked tired. Hair loosely pinned, thermos clutched in one hand, her usual poise dimmed by something softer. The room hushed as she entered. I could feel my pulse in my wrist. After class, she asked if anyone could help carry a box of old papers to her car. Nobody moved. I stood. "Thank you," she said quietly. We walked side by side down the hallway. The box wasn't heavy, but the silence was. At the parking lot, she opened the trunk and paused before speaking. "I used to keep these essays," she said, "from when I first started teaching. Thought they meant something back then." "Don't they still?" I asked. She smiled, sad, inward smile. "Meaning changes. Or maybe I do." Her eyes flicked to mine, and I saw it. The crack in her composure. A small truth slipping out before she could stop it. "I'm divorced," she said suddenly, then looked away. 8 years now, I forget to mention that until it sounds like an explanation, I didn't know what to say, so I just nodded. My hands still on the box, fingers pressed into the cardboard, grounding me. I'm sorry, I said finally. Don't be, she murmured. You weren't there. We both laughed softly at that, not because it was funny, but because it wasn't. She offered me tea back in her office. It wasn't an invitation, more like a reflex. I said yes anyway. The kettle clicked, steam rose, she poured 2 cups and set one in front of me. The cup was chipped, like it had been used too many times by someone who didn't mind small imperfections. I watched her sit across from me, legs crossed, her sleeve brushing her wrist where the chalk dust used to cling. She was quiet for a long time before saying, "People think teaching gets easier. It doesn't, it just gets lonelier." I looked at her hands, the faint tremor when she lifted the cup, the way she avoided my eyes. "I think loneliness has good taste," I said, half smiling. "It always finds the good ones." She exhaled soft but shaky, and that's when I realized I wasn't supposed to say things like that. Not to her. Not here. But she didn't stop me. The silence that followed wasn't uncomfortable. It was dense. Like every thought we weren't saying had gathered around the steam curling between us. When I stood to leave, she reached out to take my empty cup. Her fingers brushed mine, brief, accidental, deliberate. That's all. But it felt like the beginning of something neither of us would admit to wanting. I don't know why that moment stayed with me. Maybe because it felt like someone finally saw me. Something shifted after that day in her office. Not loudly, just beneath everything, a small current, quiet but constant, like static under skin. She started avoiding eye contact when I spoke. No more lingering at the end of class, no soft laughter when I made a dry remark. She'd gather her papers fast, tuck her hair behind her ear, and leave with that practiced composure that made it look like she hadn't felt anything at all. I told myself I imagined it, that maybe I'd misread everything. But then I'd catch her looking at me, not long, just a second too long. The kind of look that knows it's dangerous to exist. One afternoon, I arrived early again. The door was half open. She was at her desk, reading something on her phone. When she noticed me, she startled slightly, then smiled like she'd been caught doing something private. "You're early," she said, setting her phone down. "Habit, I guess." She nodded. The air between us wasn't awkward, just aware. "I made too much tea," she said after a pause. "Would you like some?" The cup was warm when she handed it to me. Her fingers brushed mine again. That same careful accident. I wanted to tell her I'd been thinking about her. That I'd replayed our last conversation more times than I'd admit. But she looked so calm, so unreachable in that gray cardigan, that I swallowed it instead. Halfway through class something changed. A friend, Mark, loud, oblivious, leaned over and whispered, "You and Professor Vale seem close." I laughed it off, but my stomach dropped. Later, as we all packed up, she caught my eye. Maybe she'd heard. Or maybe she just sensed it. Her expression was unreadable. "Mr. Lennox," she said, too formally, "could you stay a moment?" The others left, footsteps echoing down the hallway. When the door clicked shut, she leaned against the desk, arms folded. "I think we should keep a bit more distance," she said. Her tone was calm, but her voice had that soft tremor I'd heard once before. I nodded, even though something inside me folded. "Sure. If that's what you want." "It's not about what I want." The words came out quiet, brittle. She exhaled slowly, eyes on the window instead of me. "People notice things. They make stories out of them." I should have said something. Anything. But my throat tightened. She turned back, meeting my gaze for a heartbeat too long. The kind of look that asks for understanding and forgiveness at once. "I understand," I said finally. She smiled faintly. "You always do." As I moved toward the door, the sleeve of my jacket brushed her hand where it rested on the desk. Neither of us pulled away. It wasn't a touch, not really, but it could have been. The silence swelled, fragile, waiting. Her eyes flicked to my lips, then away, like she'd caught herself on the edge of something she couldn't survive. "I should go," I said. "Yes," she whispered. "You should." But she didn't step back. And for half a breath, neither did I. It was late, campus nearly empty. When I saw her sitting on the bench outside the library, the air smelled like rain that hadn't decided whether to fall. She had her thermos beside her, both hands wrapped around it, the same way she held her thoughts carefully, so they wouldn't spill. I almost walked past, but she looked up at the sound of my steps, and something in her face, tired, unguarded, stopped me. "You shouldn't still be here," I said. "Neither should you," she replied. I sat down beside her, leaving just enough space for good intentions to fit between us. She stared ahead, watching students drift across the parking lot. "You ever notice," she said, "how everyone looks like they're going somewhere important at night?" "Even when they're not," I said. That made her smile. Barely. But it counted. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was waiting. She shifted slightly, pulling her coat tighter. "You've been quiet in class lately. I thought you wanted distance." "I did." She hesitated. Something in her tone cracked on the second did. I looked down at my hands, then at hers. The way her thumb traced the lid of her thermos. A nervous loop. "I wasn't sure," I said softly, "if I'd done something wrong." Her breath caught. She turned toward me. "You didn't. You just make it hard to forget that I'm supposed to know better." There it was. The line between us, spoken out loud at last. I wanted to tell her that she wasn't the only one pretending to know better. That I'd stopped writing, stopped sleeping right, because every time I tried, her face showed up, patient, deliberate, unbearably kind. But I didn't. Instead, I said, "You talk like you're apologizing for feeling something." Her lips parted. She looked at me like she wanted to argue, and couldn't. "I'm not supposed to," she whispered. "Not with you, not with." She stopped herself, shaking her head. "God, this is complicated," I finished. "Disastrous," she corrected, but her voice was softer now, the fight leaking out of it. A breeze passed through. Her hair shifted across her face. I reached out, without thinking, to brush it back. My fingers froze halfway and sure, she didn't move away. "Eli." My name sounded different from her mouth, too gentle, too close. Her eyes met mine, full of something she'd been holding back for weeks. Something I'd been pretending not to see. The distance between us felt fragile, like breath could break it. "I can't do this," she said. But her voice trembled on can't. "I know," I murmured. "But you already are." She closed her eyes, exhaled, the faintest shiver running through her shoulders. We sat there. Two people pretending not to lean closer. The night around us thinning into something electric. She opened her eyes again, looked right at me, and asked, not quite aloud, but clearly enough that I heard it anyway, "What happens if we stop pretending?" The next week, she wasn't there. A substitute professor stood at the front, reading from her notes in a clipped, impersonal voice. The board still smelled faintly of her handwriting, chalk dust and jasmine soap. Her name in the attendance file felt strange, like a word that no longer fit its shape. "She's on leave," the substitute said. "Family matter." That was all. I waited after class anyway, just in case. But the hallway stayed empty. For days I kept rehearsing what I'd say if she walked in, something casual, harmless. Maybe, "You missed my brilliant essay on emotional restraint." Something that would make her smile, like before everything turned fragile. But she didn't come back, and silence has a way of expanding until it fills every corner of your life. A week later, I saw her, not in class, in town. She was sitting at a small cafe near the bus station, not our usual one. Across from her sat a man, maybe her age, maybe older. He leaned in when he spoke. She laughed, not loud, but enough to make my stomach twist. I almost went in, almost said something. But her face when she laughed, it didn't belong to me. It never had. I turned away before she could see me. That night, I couldn't write. Couldn't read. I just sat staring at my phone. Typed "Are you okay?" Deleted it. Typed again "You left" without saying anything. Deleted that too. Finally I wrote "I miss the quiet with you." I stared at it until the screen dimmed. Then locked my phone. Message unsent. 2 days later she emailed the class, short, formal. "Dear all, I will be returning next week. Thank you for your understanding. Dr. Vale." No explanation. No warmth. Just the professional distance she was rebuilding, brick by careful brick. I told myself I was fine with that. I even smiled when Mark said, "Hey, your favorite professor's back." But when she finally walked into the classroom again, something was different. The thermos was gone, her hair was shorter, and her eyes, they didn't pause on me like before. She spoke only to the class, never to me, not even a glance. I kept waiting for the air to shift, for that small charge that used to live between us. But it didn't come. The room felt normal again. And somehow that was worse. After everyone left, I stayed behind, pretending to pack slowly. She didn't look up, just said, "Benight, Mr. Lennox." Her voice was kind, distant, practiced. I nodded, throat dry. "Good night, Professor." I stood there for a second, waiting for something. A hesitation, a glance, a flicker of what used to be there. But there was nothing. So I left. I didn't feel heartbroken. I felt paused, like life forgot to finish the sentence. It was almost the end of term when she asked me to stay after class. Everyone else had gone, the scraping of chairs fading down the hallway. She was still sitting at her desk, papers spread out like she needed something to organize so her thoughts wouldn't show. "I wanted to return your essay," she said. Her tone was calm, but her hands, they wouldn't stay still. She kept folding the corner of the page, then smoothing it again. I stepped closer. "You could have just emailed it." "I could have," she said quietly. The silence between us was long enough to hear the radiator hiss again, the same sound from the first day we spoke. "I saw you in town," I said. Her eyes lifted. A pause. "I know. You saw me too." Another pause, heavier this time. "Yes." The word landed soft but certain. I wanted to ask who he was, the man at the cafe, but something in her expression told me I already knew. Or maybe it didn't matter. She sighed, leaned back. "I thought space would make this easier." "Did it?" She smiled faintly, shaking her head. "It made it quieter, not easier." I nodded, not trusting my voice. "I kept trying to remind myself what I'm risking," she went on. "The job. My reputation. The version of myself I spent years protecting. But then," she stopped, closing her eyes for a moment. "Then you'd walk in. And I'd forget what I was supposed to remember." Something inside me loosened. A knot I'd been tightening, since the first time she looked at me too long. "I didn't mean to make this harder," I said. "I know." Her voice softened, the kind people use when they're halfway to forgiving you. I don't remember moving closer, but I did. Close enough to see the faint tired lines around her eyes, the small ink stain near her wrist. She didn't move away this time. "I think," she said slowly, "we met in the wrong order of our lives." I almost laughed, but it came out as a breath. "Yeah, probably." Her hand was resting on the desk between us, her fingers half curled. I placed mine next to hers. Not touching, but near enough to feel the heat radiate. For a moment, that was everything. All the things we hadn't said existed right there, in that inch of air between our hands. "I keep thinking," I said quietly, "if I don't tell you now, I'll never stop wondering." Her eyes met mine, steady, gentle, sad. "Then tell me." I took a breath. "You make me want to stay still." "That's all." She smiled, tired smile that always felt like a secret. "I think that's enough," she said. Her fingers shifted, brushing mine just once, deliberate, final. "Okay," she whispered. I nodded. "Okay." The word sat between us, soft but solid. And just like that, the tension broke, not with a kiss or a confession, but with quiet understanding. It's been almost a year since that afternoon, the one where, "okay," became the last word between us. Things changed quietly, the way seasons do when you're too distracted to notice. She finished the semester, I graduated. There was no dramatic farewell, no confessions at doorsteps. Just a warm handshake after my final paper, her voice steady as she said, "You did well, Mr. Lennox." That night I thought about how she still used my last name, even then. Boundaries, even in goodbye. I moved to the city for a writing job. The first few months were strange, too much noise, too little silence. Every morning at 8:47, I'd catch myself pausing by the cafe on the corner, out of habit. Ordering tea instead of coffee, because it felt like something she would do. It took me months to realize she'd taught me something more than literature. The difference between restraint and absence. Between holding back and holding on. I saw her again once, by accident, or maybe not. A small bookstore downtown, early evening. She was by the window, a half-read paperback in hand, steam curling from a cup beside her. She hadn't changed much, still that quiet grace, still the same small silver ring she used to twist when she was thinking. She looked up, saw me, and for a second, neither of us knew whether to smile or speak. Then she did. that soft, unguarded smile that had undone me once. I walked over. "Tea?" I asked, glancing at the cup. She nodded. "Old habits." We talked for a while. Not about the past, not about us, just life, my work, her classes, the new garden she was trying to keep alive. It felt like revisiting a song we both knew, but humming different parts this time. When I got up to leave, she touched my arm lightly. "The same way she used to pass a paper, or a cup." "A lie," she said, and for once, she didn't sound like my professor anymore. "I'm glad you're doing well." "So am I," I said. "You look peaceful." Her smile deepened, lines softening around her eyes. "Maybe I finally learned restraint." I laughed, and she did too. The sound was small, but it stayed. It's funny how something that once felt unbearable can become something you carry gently. Not regret. Not loss. Just weight that reminds you you're still capable of feeling deeply. Sometimes, when I'm writing late, I catch myself making tea instead of coffee. Sometimes I still look at the clock at 8:47 a.m. and imagine her unlocking her office, thermos in hand. And sometimes, that's enough. Because some people don't stay as lovers or lessons. They stay as quiet proof that you were once understood exactly as you were.